what are some changes that you know you want to make in your life, but just haven't seemed to be able to do it consistently? So doesn't have to be super specific, but just I want you to think of things as you're watching this. What are some changes that you know you want to make in your life? Could be in health, could be in your career, could be in relationships, but you know you just haven't been able to consistently do it. Okay, so think of those things. One of the main things that I've struggled with throughout my life, and that I hear so many people struggling with, is having the urgency to make changes before things get really bad, right? Can you picture those things where you knew you wanted to do something and you just kept putting it off, and then some sort of situation happened where you hit rock bottom or you were forced to do it, and then you make the change. Like, think about health. Pretty much everybody wants to be healthier, maybe lose some weight, get to the gym more. They want to look and feel better. Ask almost anyone what changes they want to make in their life, and it's one of the first answers you'll get. It's almost on everybody's New Year's resolutions list. But when you look at the people around you, and maybe you can identify this, there's a lot of times where people don't actually take the necessary action to make it happen because there's nothing forcing them to do it. But then once something happens, like there's a health scare or there's a strict warning from their doctor, or maybe they just sign up for a race that actually has a real deadline, then people start to kick it into gear. So I see that happen all the time with health, that because there's no sense of urgency, it's really hard to actually do it until there's some sort of big moment that happens or some sort of real deadline. I see men talking all the time about wanting to get married, and they want to find an amazing girl that checks all the boxes. But in their singleness, they're just sitting around, not working on themselves, not using the time to prepare well to go into marriage ready. So it isn't until they actually find that girl that then, boom, all of a sudden now there's a sense of urgency to kick it into gear. There's so many things that we know we should be doing, but just can't seem to get the motivation to do them. So why is that? It's a question I've been wanting to answer for myself. I've been desperately just trying to find the answer to be able to help people like you, other men who are struggling with this same thing. How do we develop a sense of urgency to do the things we know we want to do before there's some sort of thing that forces us to do them? And John Wooden has a quote where he says, "When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare." When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. And in Matthew 24, it says, "Always be ready because you don't know the day that your Lord is going to come." You must develop a greater sense of urgency in your life to make changes, even if no one is forcing you to. You have to develop this greater sense of urgency to make the most of your life, even when there isn't that hard deadline or there's no catastrophic circumstance making you do it. So I think this is really what sets apart great men from average men. Can you develop the ability to do the things that you know you need to do and the things that you want to do without anyone or anything forcing you to do it? Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today. How do we actually do this? And I want to just introduce two concepts today that I hope will help you live with a greater sense of urgency. And these are going to be fairly high-level concepts today, and in future trainings, we'll really dig deeper and deeper into them. But I just want to introduce these two things to you to get you thinking about how you can do them in your lives. So let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can see this presentation we got. You can follow along with the slides. Okay. Urgency concept number one, how to raise your sense of urgency. You have to raise your standards. Okay, so in life, we get what we expect to get out of life. What you decide that you can tolerate or deal with, that level, is usually what you're actually going to get. So what do I mean by standards? We all have certain standards that we set in our lives in the different areas. If all I expect out of myself is to just be in average physical shape, then that's mostly what I'm going to get, right? If that's my expectation, if that's what I can tolerate, then that's most likely what I'm going to get. If all I expect out of myself is to get a job that just earns minimum wage, then that's probably exactly what I'm going to do. If all I expect of myself is to get married, but I don't have a greater standard or a greater vision for being a great husband or a great dad, then that's all I'm going to get. I'm probably going to get married, but it's going to stop there. So you aren't guaranteed to reach your goals. We're not always guaranteed to reach our goals, but we are pretty much guaranteed to get our standards. And Ed Milet says this great. He's got a quote that says, if you want the best possible chance of reaching your goals, you need to adjust your standards. And then reaching your goals will become almost automatic. So we're constantly told by different people, upgrade your goals, which you should, absolutely. But you also need to constantly reflect on your standards and upgrade those as well if you want to move to the next level. So think about the question I asked earlier, that, what is something that you want to change in your life but just can't seem to do it? Now think of that in terms of the standard that you have set for yourself. Have you settled for a low standard in that area? Because higher standards change things from I should do this to I must do this. Higher standards pulls us up to that level, whereas low standards pull us down, right? So if your standard is set high, you're going to then pull yourself up to that spot. If you have low standards, you're usually going to fall to the levels of your standards. If you always have thought that you're not a healthy person, that's probably the results that you're going to get. If you've always figured that you would be somebody who just doesn't have good relationships, it's probably what you're going to get. If you're willing to tolerate something, that is most likely the outcome that you're going to get. I want you to think about that. Ask yourself, what are the standards, the things that I can tolerate? Because that's probably where you're going to land. So when you're setting your goals, you must ask yourself, what am I willing to tolerate? You must ask yourself what your standards are. The greatest individuals, the greatest companies, the greatest sports teams, they always set higher standards than other teams. And yeah, I heard a story from Coach Nick Saban for Alabama, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. But he had a standard where most coaches say, we're going to practice until we get something right. Nick Saban said, we're going to practice this until we cannot get it wrong. That was his standard. We're going to practice this so many times that we literally can't get it wrong. He has a higher standard for his team, and it shows. I think he's won 7 championships. His teams are always right up there with the great teams because he has set a standard of greatness that raises the level of play of his players. So if you it's fully up to you to decide what your standards are and what you can tolerate. So I'm not going to tell you what your standards should be. That's between you and God. But it is critical to understand that you're going to get the level of your standards in the different areas of your life. So if you want change, you must upgrade your standards. So real quickly, I want you to just write down, you can pause this video at any point, but I want you to write down what you think your standards have been in 4 different categories. So 4 different categories. Get a sheet of paper or pull out your phone with the notes, whatever it is. What have your standards been in 4 categories? Your relationship with God. What are you tolerating? What are you settling for? What is the standard of intimacy and depth that you want to have with God? Number 2, relationship with others. What's the standard that you have there? How do you choose your friend groups? How do you choose who you're going to date or who you're going to marry? What is the standard you've set with your marriage? Is it enough just to be married, or do you want a great marriage? Those are the kind of things I'm talking about here. So your relationship with others. The next would be career and finances. What have your standards been in your career? What have your standards been in your finances? Because what you can tolerate, what you think is okay, is most likely what you're going to get. So if you want to go to that next level, you have to raise your standards. Then the last one would be health. What have your standards been in health? Are you okay with just being in average shape? Or do you want to be in really great shape? Are you okay being in bad shape? Is that your standard? Is that kind of what you can tolerate? Or do you want to be in good shape? So quickly jot down what your standards have been in those different areas. Ask yourself what you've been able to tolerate and what has just been good enough. Okay, so you can pause the video, come back when you're done with that. All right, so now that you've done that, got that exercise done, it's interesting, huh? These are things that we don't think about a lot of times. And Joel Brown, he has a great quote. He says, we only get what we believe that we deserve. Raise the bar, raise your standards, and you'll receive a better outcome. So that's key. We're talking about raising our standards. Tony Robbins also has a great quote where he says, what changes people is when their shoulds become musts. When their shoulds become musts, most likely you're settling for a lower standard, and that thing that you want is just a should. Oh, it'd be nice to have that. it'd be great if I was a little healthier. It'd be great if I made a little more money, but it hasn't become a must for you. And if there's a gap between what you're getting and what you want to get, most likely you need to upgrade your standards. What you can tolerate is ultimately what you're going to get. So one thing that you can do to help upgrade your standard is to just identify the limiting beliefs that are causing you to set the standard where it is. The limiting beliefs. So usually there's something holding you back from believing that you're capable of that next level, or to believe that you're capable of that higher standard, that you're deserving of it. There's usually there's a thought pattern that was created because of the way you were raised, or something happened to you when you were younger. Maybe there was a moment where you failed, or someone said something to you that triggered this limiting belief that now has created you, or has caused you to have a lower standard in your life. There's almost always a limiting belief tied to that standard. So for your health, maybe your whole family's always been out of shape, and so you just believe that's going to be your story. So you settle for that standard. For your career, maybe someone said something to you when you were younger that made you believe that you weren't good enough, or that you didn't have what it takes, that you weren't talented, or that you wouldn't amount to anything. And you've now believed that, and that's keeping you at a lower standard. For relationships, maybe you ruined some past relationship, and so now you think you're going to ruin this one in the future, so you just don't invest anything. Whatever it may be, there's usually a deep-rooted belief that is making you choose that standard for your life. So take a look at those standards you just wrote down for those 4 areas: with God, relationships, career, and finance. Take a look at those, and you can pause the video again if you want, and just ask yourself, are there limiting beliefs here that are causing me to settle for this standard? And maybe some of the areas are great. Maybe you have high standards in some of these 4 areas, and that's awesome. That's totally fine. But look at the 1 or 2 areas that you want to make changes, and see if there's a limiting belief causing you to settle for that standard. Okay, so that's standards. All right. So the second part of raising your sense of urgency, and this goes hand in hand with raising your standards, is something called psychological necessity. And this is raising the necessity in your life. So Brendan Burchard, he's really the one who kind of introduced this concept to me, but he says necessity is the emotional drive that makes a great performance a must instead of a preference. Again, changing our shoulds to must. Necessity is that emotional drive, that thing that makes us, raise our standards to make things a must. So this is where you can force yourself to do things even when you don't want to do them. This is where you feel the necessity to be great even when you don't feel inspired or motivated. A lot of times that happens. We don't feel inspired or motivated, so we don't take action. But necessity demands that you take action on a consistent basis. Necessity inspires that higher sense of motivation than usual because it's a value. Necessity is a value of yours. Excellence is a value of yours, and you feel like you have a duty in order to do it. So there's 3 main ways that I want to talk about raising necessity, and you can implement these into your life. So the first one is to link it to your identity. We've talked a lot about the power of identity. We're always going to behave in alignment with how we view ourselves. We're going to act in congruence with what we value. So if you place a high value on excellence in everything that you do, then you're going to act more consistently with excellence. So you must develop the identity of someone who consistently takes action. You must develop the identity of someone who does everything with excellence. When the personal commitment and the drive to be great on a daily basis doesn't exist, then none of these tools, none of these tactics are going to matter. They're not going to matter if you don't feel that drive and the necessity to be great on a consistent basis. And Vince Lombardi has a great quote where he says, the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. So it doesn't matter what you do, the quality of your life is going to be in proportion to your commitment to excellence. So whether you're a CEO, you need to be excellent. Whether you're an entry-level job, you need to be excellent. You feel this need and this deep sense of duty and identity to be great on a consistent basis. You must develop a deep care to perform well at any task or any activity because it's just who you are. It's who you are. Do you have that identity of someone who does their best, whether you enjoy the activity or not? There's a lot of activities I don't enjoy, and a lot of times I'm tempted to not do a great job at it. But if my identity is saying that I'm a person who does things with excellence, then I have to do this, that I have to do this well, it changes how I view these things. Someone who has a deep commitment to excellence does it in every single area of their life. So you can ask yourself, take a look at the different activities you've been involved in. Are you committed to excellence in all of the activities or just a couple things that you enjoy? Because if it's only in the things that you enjoy, it probably means it's more tied to your motivation or your inspiration than it is to your identity. And ultimately, how you do anything is typically how you're going to do everything. How you do anything is typically how you do everything. If you're used to cutting corners at the gym over and over and over, not doing the reps you said you were going to do, not sticking to your workout schedule, sleeping in, whatever it is, oftentimes you're going to cut corners in other things. If you're someone who, cuts corners in your job, then you're probably going to cut corners in your relationships. The actions that you take on a consistent basis are the things that build your habits. The actions that you take when no one is looking builds the habits that you have when you're in front of others. So you got to commit to being a person of necessity. You have to tie that to who you are. Okay, the next one, and this is huge, is to link it to the service of others. If you want to raise the necessity where each day you feel that drive and that need to be great and to live to your full potential, link it to the service of others. And we're more likely to do more for others than we are for ourselves, right? Think of your life. Do you usually follow through on commitments you make to other people more than the commitments that you make to yourself? That's usually the case. If I tell a friend that I'm going to be at the gym at 8:00 and they're waiting on me, I have way more incentive to get there because my reputation is on the line. But if I just tell myself I got to be at the gym at 8:00 and no one's going to know if I'm there or not, it's easier to blow it off, right? That's usually the case. We're way more likely to follow through with, when our reputation is on the line. We're way more likely to follow through if it's for someone that we love and somebody that we care about. And I love this story, but an Olympic runner was asked who he thinks is going to win a race. So in sprinting, the difference between the winner and second place is usually just fractions of a second. So super close. And someone asked him how he knew who was going to win. And his answer was pretty shocking. He said it's most likely the runner that's doing this race for his mom. Or it's most likely the runner that's doing it for someone else that's really important in his life, that they're running for them. The people who are great on a consistent basis consistently tap into that higher sense of duty to others. And as believers, as Christ followers, this should be absolutely tapping into our duty to God. First of all, the stewardship of our gifts, our abilities, and the opportunities that he's given us. The more you can tap into that on a consistent basis, the greater the urgency you're going to feel to be at your best. Where you're like, God created me for a purpose. God created me for a reason. He's given me these gifts and abilities. He's given me these opportunities. It is my responsibility and duty to steward that well and to do my best today. If you feel that necessity, you're going to consistently live with that sense of urgency. So we should also tap into our duty to others, the mission that God has on our lives. One of the most compelling things in our life is to pursue God's mission for us. In whatever way he's gifted you, whatever way he's called you to serve others specifically, tap into that on a daily basis and let that raise your necessity to be great. High performers, the people who really are consistently excellent, feel this necessity to perform well out of a sense of duty to someone or something that is beyond themselves, or they feel like, man, somebody is counting on me right now, or I'm trying to fulfill this promise or this responsibility to somebody. So one of the best ways to consistently do this is to ask yourself throughout the day, who needs me at my best right now? Who needs me at my best right now? Ask yourself this question throughout the day. When you sit down at your desk, ask yourself, who needs me to be great right now? For me, it's all the men that I'm serving. It's to get this mission out of helping men overcome passivity and to chase down their God-given dreams. When I sit down and I ask myself this, I'm like, man, I need to be great right now for them. For you, it could be, I want to be great right now for my family. I want to be great right now for my wife and for my kids. I want to provide them the best possible life. So right now, I need to focus and I need to be great. And I need to take today seriously and I need to win the day. I need to make today my masterpiece. So this could be a trigger when you sit at your desk. When you sit down in your car, you could set an alarm on your phone that pops this question up. Something where like you're just consistently asking yourself, who needs me at my best right now? Because if you can tap into that, you're going to feel a greater sense of urgency in your life. So that's number 2. That's a huge thing. And then the last thing to raise necessity here is to actually just set deadlines for everything that's actually important in your life. And this seems simple. You could think of your life. Nothing drives urgency like a real deadline. And a lot of times we don't have urgency because we're doing these things that don't have deadlines. So set a deadline. I think we all know this. When there's a deadline you have to meet, you're going to rise to the occasion. You're going to figure out a way to get it done. So with every goal, with every change that you want to make, with your dreams, you must start to put deadlines on them, or a lot of them are just going to get left undone. When you just live in that realm of saying, someday I'm going to do this. Someday I'm going to get my health under control. Someday I'm going to start saving my finances. Someday I'm going to start that business. If it just lives in that world of someday and there's not a hard deadline, most likely you're never going to actually get to it. There must be a deadline that actually means something to you as well. Like it has to cost you. There has to be, you feel that sense of urgency to hit it on the deadline. If there's not some consequence or benefit to hitting that deadline, then you may push it off as well. So the best way to do this, to actually like feel some weight on this deadline that you set, is to put your identity and your reputation on the line by making the commitment public. So say you set a deadline for this dream or this business that you want to start. Tell someone you know that that's what you're planning on doing. Tell them that this is my deadline. Put your reputation on the line. Put your identity on the line. Announce it to somebody. I know it's scary, but it actually makes the deadline real. So do something where you feel the consequences if you don't actually hit the deadline. So that would be my last recommendation for raising necessity in your life. You have to set some deadlines. So again, go look at those 4 areas: your relationship with God, your relationship with others, your career, your health. Think about the standards that you're setting. How can you raise those? How can you say, I want to go to this next level? Try to identify those limiting beliefs in your life that are keeping you at a lower standard. Identify those, and then, identify the actual truth that's there, and then raise the necessity to be great. Do it for a duty to God, a duty to others, and then set deadlines. So that's all I got for you today. I hope this was super helpful. This has been something that I've been working on a lot. And I just want each of us to feel that urgency to make each day our masterpiece, to win the day, because we want to build a life that we're proud of. We want to build a life of significance. We want to be good stewards of everything that God's given us. So it's important for us to continue to identify where we're setting lower standards, where we're settling, and then raise that necessity so that you can be the man that God's called you to be. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.